Thank you.
Okay, we're good. Tell the mayor we're ready.
I hear you. We have a visitor from Metro, is that right?
That is correct. Councilor Dirksen will be presenting this evening remotely.
During communications?
Correct.
Yes. Communications, Mayor.
Yeah. Brian, I think I'll ask you to report on the governor's announcements when we at city manager business. Is that all right?
Yes, whenever you want, Mayor.
That's when I want. Okay, are we ready to go?
We are ready. We are live. We were told we are live.
Good evening to those of you in our city hall. This is the council, which is all remote tonight. I will call to order the Wilsonville City Council meeting for March 16, 2020 at 7 o'clock p.m. and request a roll call, please.
Councilor Linville?
Here.
Councilor West?
Here.
Council President Ackerval?
Here.
Councilor Lehan?
Here.
Mayor Knapp?
Here. Thank you all. We're going to try to conduct this meeting in as close to a normal mode as we can, though we are experimenting for the first time with this remote technology, so it may not be exactly like that. But I would request that those present in City Hall and those of us that are in other locations join together and conduct a Pledge of Allegiance at this time. And Councilor Lehan has got a flag for us to see on our videos.
A miniature version, yeah. Okay.
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Pledge to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Council, I'm open to a motion on order of agenda.
Your Honor, I move to approve the order of agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
As
Moved and
amended.
seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Mayor, I'm sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
As amended, correct?
I believe.
As amended, I move to approve the order of agenda as amended.
Well, what's our amendment?
The declaration, the emergency declaration.
Emergency.
For mayor's business.
All right. So we did not have that as formal part. Is that all right with the maker of the motion?
It is completely fine with me.
And the second?
Yes.
So the vote then is on the agenda as amended. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Okay. Now I'm mixed up here. The emergency declaration that we have talked about in the past has been something that we have felt it was important to move forward on since our last council meeting. I consulted several times with City Manager Cosgrove, and we reached an agreement on this. So I think I would like to ask Mr. Cosgrove if he could give us a brief statement on what the emergency declaration accomplishes for us. This is in the package that the council has received. I think it's behind the front cover there as resolution number 2803. Do you want to give us a little rundown, sir?
I do, and I'm going to pass it right over to Ms. Jacobson because she is the crafter of the declaration.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You all have this in your packet, and I presume you've read it. It's pretty self-explanatory. Way back in 2005, you drafted a resolution that laid out the parameters of what you would have in an emergency declaration should one need to be adopted and authorized. When that happened, of course, it wasn't so much with a pandemic in mind. It had more to do with natural disasters, but it had a lot of key elements that work just as well here. So there are things not in here like, roadblocks and emergency power outages and those kinds of things are commandeering public property. But the other things that are in here were mostly in your resolution, and then a few things that I added just given what's been going on in terms of what the state, the federal, and the federal government have been doing, and also some broad brush provisions that allow for flexibility for things that we haven't even thought of yet, since those things seem to be occurring every day. It also, what this does is it gives you some ability to potentially recover some federal funds.
I can add to that, Mayor. Just so you know, I'll just briefly kind of outline some of the, under Section 2, it allows us to redirect funds and credit card allocations. We have already done that this morning. We had an emergency management meeting this morning, and we've done that. Commit to and implement mutual aid agreements. We will continue to do that. Suspending standard procurement procedures under certain conditions. Closing city facilities, which we have already done. Curtailing, modifying programs, which we already have done and will continue to do. And then evacuation or restricting persons as needed, should that come to pass. Those are kind of the big ones, and then there's some other ones as well that I don't need to get into, but those are kind of the primary ones that we that we'll be implementing. So with that, we'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions for staff with regard to the declaration of state of emergency? Council President Akkerval, please.
I would just say it looks like the declaration will expire on May 1st, but if we needed to extend it, that is an option, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it can be suspended earlier or extended. We just need to, and that's the way it's been written with the counties and the state as well. In fact, the counties were kind of going 2 weeks at a time. We went a little bit longer because our declaration just really occurred on Friday, and by Friday it was apparent that this wasn't going to resolve in a couple of weeks. So we went to May 1st, but that was just kind of an arbitrary date that seemed reasonable at the time.
So when is our first meeting in May?
Hang on a second.
I think it's
The 6th.
May 1.
May what?
May 4th.
May 4th.
4th.
May 4th. So should we do it so that we don't have to have an emergency meeting at the last minute?
Yeah, I mean, the way we did it this time was, and you know, Mayor, because I called you and said, will you email me and asked you if it was okay to do this? We could do that, or you could do it to May 4th. There's no magic to that number. So if you want to do it for the first meeting in May, I'm all on board with that. That's fine with us.
Seems to me like it's just kind of a pragmatic approach. It's not really any longer time. It just means that we're lined up when we're going to be meeting anyway. So I kind of like that idea, but
It's a good idea.
maybe somebody else has a comment.
I think it's a good idea. I'll change it.
So just a motion and a second, and we will amend that resolution.
Okay. Council, do you want to make a motion to amend the May 1st, 2020 expiration to May 5th, shall we say, or the day after our May meeting? Anybody?
So we're not approving the.
This just to amend the draft at this point.
Okay. Well, I'll move to amend the draft to have the declaration expire on May 5th, 2020, as opposed to May 1st.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Other discussion? Councilor West, question?
Yeah, just a quick question on the bullet points here where it talks about city offices being closed and you guys have done that. I just have a quick question. How is SMART handling this? Does this cover that? I know that, of course, it's under the city, but that comes to mind as like a potential pinch for people, but also like making sure we're doing social distancing.
Right, so that would be covered under a curtail, modify, or postpone city services as deemed necessary. There's some tricky parts to SMART's operation in terms of federal funding. So we can't just curtail one part of those services without putting the city at risk for being sued for not treating people equitably. So there's a lot of nuance to those services that SMART provides in terms of funding. So we would need to be very careful about what we did with transit at this point. If we were
SMART at this.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. SMART at this point is operational and as up and running normally. There's no change in anything at this time. We're not limiting the number of people on a bus or where they sit apart from one another. There's no interventions at this time regarding our transit system.
Well, we're absolutely recommending good social distancing protocols. The reality is there's been a steep decline in ridership, so we're not seeing a lot of ridership right now. We're doing some messaging on making sure people understand that we're cleaning our buses daily, so that maybe will help a little bit. But the reality is people just aren't riding mass transit right now. But it's also a catch-22 in that people that do ride transit, it's their only form of transportation. So shutting it down doesn't seem like a good option right now. And that's from this morning when we met in our executive team meeting. That was the message from Dwight Brashear.
So
are we only cleaning daily, or is there wipe downs periodically throughout different time frames or throughout the day to try to stop the spread of any microbiology?
My understanding is that we do a thorough cleaning every night when the buses come offline. And in terms of are they doing, it would be hard for the drivers to be doing cleaning while they're, in transit going from point A to point B, but I can check back with Dwight tomorrow morning and I can get back to you with any additional cleaning that may be going on. I just don't have it off the top of my head.
Here's just insight. I would recommend if they're on a break or if it's a short period, if there's I know this is not what we're voting about, if there's a wipe down of like we're commonplace of hands, rails, quick wipe downs, and then the thorough cleaning in the nights, that can be effective.
That all sounds very reasonable. I just don't know what the operational protocols are, but I will definitely pass that message along for you.
So procedure.
Okay, remind the council that we're talking about a resolution to give the city authority to take a range of actions. We're not, there's many different actions that we can take, have been taking, probably should take, but we need to have the legal authority to proceed, and that's what we're dealing with right this second.
So I think we need to vote on the date, and then we can get to the resolution in more detail.
Yes, so I was asking if there's any other questions about the proposed modification. Is there from council? If not, and you're ready to vote, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion to modify the draft to say May 5, 2020 instead of May 1 for expiration date on resolution number 2803, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, as far as consideration of the overall resolution itself, are we ready to move forward on that, or does council have questions with regard to the authorizing resolution itself?
I would just make one statement before you vote. So the mayor approved this on Friday, and that's when the emergency declaration went into effect, and that's when office operations started being adjusted and the credit card limits started being raised. What you're doing now is agreeing to ratify what's already been approved unless you want to modify it or not enact it.
Our charter states that the mayor can declare an emergency, and then there's a whole line of succession if the mayor's not available. So what you're doing is ratifying the mayor's decision to declare a local emergency.
Any questions? All right. right. I'll ask for the vote then, or I'll ask for a motion then with regard to adoption of Resolution 2803, if it pleases the council.
Your Honor,
As amended, please.
Your Honor, I move that we approve resolution number 2803 as amended.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. So I heard second from Councilor West first, I think. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Bringing us to our second item of mayor's business, which is our position as city council president. And I have queried Councilor Ackerval whether she would be interested and willing to continue through the year 2020 in that position, and she has indicated that she would. I am unsure if anyone else feels a urgency to step forward and challenge that, or what anybody else's view is. Is there any other member of council that would like to be considered for this position at this time? I'm seeing none. Councilor Ackerval, would you like to say a word or two?
Sure. Thank you. If this is the direction that council would like to go, I would be very happy to do it. This last year in the role, I feel like has drawn me closer to the work and to my role on council and serving as council president. So I've really appreciated that and appreciate the confidence of the rest of council. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say publicly things that I've said to Councilor Ackerval is that I think that she has done a very good job in the role, and I observed that she has matured and grown in some ways, which I appreciate in exercising those duties, and I think that the city would be served well by asking her to continue doing those things for the council, if that's the agreement of the rest of council.
Your Honor, Your
Go
Honor,
ahead.
I would move to ratify the selection of Council President Kristen Ackerval to serve for another term as Council President through the end of 2020.
Thank you very much. Moved and seconded. Moved by Councilor Lehan, seconded by Councilor West. Anybody else like to make a comment at this point?
Excellent job.
Yes.
Very good.
Oh, I know.
Thank you.
Good job.
That's not me.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for stepping
Good work.
forward to do that work.
Thank you.
Well, let's take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, and thank you, Councilor President Ackerval, for another year.
Yes,
Thank
can
you.
vote for
Thank you all very much.
Third item on my mayor's business agenda is upcoming meetings, and I don't have any real specifics, as each of you is aware, and I think the public is aware also. An awful lot of meetings are being postponed or canceled due to social distancing recommendations. Early on, when it became clear that this was the direction that we were headed, staff stepped forward and started to stand up the technology that we're using tonight for the first time. I wanted to tell them how much I appreciate the work that they have put into helping us figure out how to conduct a meeting in this form. There are still some concerns, I guess, about how we meet public meeting law in this kind of a protocol, and we have the ability for the public to be present at City Hall and for the entire council to hear from them in a public hearing format. So we're honoring those obligations that we have to the public. As we go forward over time, there may be times that we have to make other accommodations or figure out how to do this. I think it's important important that we maintain steadfast and committed to conducting the public's business, especially in this time of difficulty, to the most transparent and thoughtful way that we can to meet the evolving challenges. But it's going to be different, I think, than it's ever been for any of us as we go forward. So thank you all for your willingness to adapt and learn something new, and we fully intend as a council to continue to do the work of the people of Wilsonville. So that's really all I have to say about upcoming meetings. We do have the pleasure of having Metro Councilor Dirksen present, I think, in chambers there to give us a report on the evolving and soon-to-be proposed transportation measure for 2020. So, Councilor Dirksen, welcome to Wilsonville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight. My goal is to give you an update on where we are with the regional transportation measure that Metro is intending to put on the ballot in November. And I just want to confirm, I can hear you. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Very good here, yes.
Wonderful, thank you. So as I'm sure all of you are aware, we've been considering for some time a regional transportation measure in light of the amount of federal funding the region is receiving, and also kind of in the aftermath of the state passing the 2017 measure and recognizing that there's still a shortfall to meet the needs of our region and for improvements to our transportation system. So it's my pleasure tonight to give you an update on kind of where we are in that process. The first thing we did when we started a formal process to craft a measure was to create a task force, an advisory committee that's made up of equal parts local elected officials, business leaders, and community members to help us look at all the options for a potential regional transportation funding measure. And we looked at nearly every major corridor in the region, the places we know are congested and dangerous and dealing with growing demand in cars, trucks, and transit. We asked what might be ready for investment. I'm getting a message from my assistant saying she's not seeing the presentation. Are you seeing the presentation?
No.
No, we're not.
We're hearing you.
We're seeing you.
Actually, you're seeing me?
Yes.
Oh, that's a mistake.
You need to share your screen.
Okay. What did I do wrong?
Go to either the
Share
top or the
screen.
bottom of the screen and share your screen.
There we go.
Joe.
Now we can't see you.
How's that?
It's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right, so this is a map that shows all the corridors that we considered. We looked at a wide range of possible benefits from investing in these corridors, especially dealing with growth and addressing congestion and improving safety. Then we selected our top priorities, 13 Tier 1 corridors, including downtown Portland and the Rose Corridor, and 16 Tier 2 corridors. And over the summer, we asked local investment teams of community members from each county to take a close look at those corridors, working with the local jurisdiction staff and our own team to see what kinds of projects are possible and to provide valuable feedback to shape recommendations about what investment should be prioritized in each corridor. Now, these 30 people met dozens of times for tours and discussions, and they presented their results back to the task force and staff in early fall. Now, these dots indicate major job centers throughout the region. Just as transportation is more than wheels moving, a job is more than just a paycheck. And for many people who could be served by this measure, a job means their opportunity for building wealth and improving the quality of life for them and for their family. So these corridors take people there to their jobs too, and then home again. Next, we evaluated those corridors and determined what it would cost to make those investments. The first figure you see is what a regional measure would raise, and the second shows the matching funds that we could expect from the state and federal governments toward completing those projects. Here are highlights of the Tier 1 corridors that were identified. 82nd Avenue, 122nd Avenue, 162nd Avenue, what's called the Albina Vision, what I was calling the Rose Quarter, Burnside Street from west to east, from where Barnes Road connects to 217 all the way out to Gresham. Why that one, you might ask? This has actually been identified as the major east-west route across the region if there is a subduction earthquake in the Portland metro area. This is the corridor and route that's identified as what's most likely to survive and be accessible after such an earthquake. That evaluation done based on the fact that it has the least amount of structure that it goes over or that goes over it that could potentially collapse. In the central city, looking at a max tunnel that would run from east to west to allow one of the east-west max lines to run through the downtown area without being restricted by the surface traffic in that area. Clackamas to Columbia, 181st Avenue to 172nd. This is a route that would take you all the way from Sandy Boulevard and Interstate 84 on the north to Highway 212 and be the major north-south connector in East County for Happy Valley in that area. Particularly at the southern portion, the diagonal, it says New Connector Road. Right now, we have 181st and 172nd, but they do not connect. So adding this diagonal connector road would provide a north-south link all the way from north-south in Multnomah County. Here on the west side, and then at the southern end of that, improvements to Highway 212, what's called the Sunrise Corridor, picking up where Highway 224, the Milwaukee Expressway, was extended from 205 into Clackamas, and then carrying that on out to Highway 212, and where it would connect to improvements to the east side of Happy Valley, also to Damascus and Boring area, which is a high growth area, and I anticipated and identified over the next couple of decades. And then McLaughlin Boulevard, a major north-south route on the east side that has been neglected for some time. Powell Boulevard, another east-west route that would link from the new Tillicum Crossing Bridge in downtown Portland all the way out to Gresham. Here on the west side, of course, then we would have the Southwest Corridor. This would provide the local matching funds that we would need to match federal funds to build the Southwest Corridor light rail line, but it would also include funding for many other improvements for walking and biking, improvements in the Tiger Triangle, a Markham connector, and a lot of other improvements, including stormwater. Again, Barber Boulevard through Portland and the Southwest Corridor is a route that's been neglected for some time. The north-south route in Washington County, southwest 185th Avenue from Highway 26 all the way to Farmington Road. And probably the poster child for this whole thing, the Tualatin Valley Highway, all the way from where it connects to Highway 26 and also links into Barnes Road and to Burnside Street, all the way through Washington County and out to Forest Grove. myself here. What do these corridors have in common? Nearly all of them were originally planned and constructed by the state as rural highways. But now, with the growth of our region, they need to function as major urban arterials, something they're not designed to do. They need to be reconfigured to allow for improved traffic flow, including turning movements at major intersections, improved accommodation of transit, and safe access for pedestrians and bicyclists. Excuse me, went too far. At the council's direction, staff also included these regional programs to provide ongoing funding and benefits beyond the 13 corridors in the measure. We want to bring benefits to the whole region, safer, easier transportation that meets the needs of today and the growth that's happening in the future. While the funding for the corridor projects would be one-time money for construction, this bucket of money would have a total of $50 million a year, roughly, for 20 years to fund these programs. In addition to those on the screen, we are also planning a stable communities program to help prevent displacement in the priority corridors. Engagement to help define these next, we expect a recommendation from our staff later this spring. This talks about the potential for jobs created by this measure during construction. Frankly, though, Metro staff believes this analysis is a conservative number. For example, the cost for right-of-way or to purchase transit vehicles is excluded. The direct construction jobs created as a result of the capital spending includes construction workers as well as anyone else that receives a paycheck from the construction sector, like managers, supervisors, office personnel. And the secondary jobs are created as the construction companies and workers spend their earnings on goods and services. So how much is all this going to cost? We're talking about the biggest investment in transportation in at least one generation, if not two. This is big stuff. We'll need to raise about $350 to $450 million per year. What we know about current funding sources in the region is that federal funding is unreliable and extremely competitive with other metro regions across the country. The state, it's improved, but it's limited in scope and limited in amount. If you recall, the 2017 measure raised $5.3 billion. But if those of you who were involved in discussions of that, Mr. Mayor, you may remember, we asked for $8.5 billion. So while 5.3 is a lot, it's not everything we need. There's also local funding available, but it's varied, it's limited, and it's primarily focused on local streets, not on major regional byways across the region. So how could we pay for it? Here's one concept we think can raise the funds we need to fulfill this vision that we're building for our community. We also studied a number of other options, and we continue to consider them, including potential income taxes. We'll keep exploring options through this spring with partners like you. And we think these options are feasible and fair and could be supported by voters based on what we've seen of public opinion research to date. That's my presentation. That's a lot of information. I'd be happy to answer or try to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Dirksen. Council, any questions, clarifications, or comments that you would like to make at this point? Councilor Lehan is who's speaking.
Yeah, Councilor Dirksen, could you put the main map back up? The primary map?
Sure.
The first one you had there.
One where it showed all the different corridors.
Yeah, showed all the corridors.
There.
I have to get these pictures of these people away. But the ones where there are projects.
That one.
Okay.
The green ones are the tier, sorry, yeah, you can read it. Tier 1, Tier 2.
Well, it sort of jumps out at me, you know, what would you say the advantage to this plan is for the city of Wilsonville?
Yeah. Well, the thing that I would say is that while each of us has an address, we live in a town, but all of us live our lives in more than just that town.
Right.
I think Wilsonville is similar to most of the other communities in my district, as well as most of Metro, where a large percentage of the people that commute, somewhere between 75 and 85% of a workforce commute from the town they live in to somewhere else to do their job. And
right.
So improvements in the region benefit everybody regardless of where they live.
Well, that's true to some degree. One of the categories of benefits when you went through the various benefits, though, that I also didn't see there is trucking, and particularly interstate trucking or through trucking, you know, because we have two, in terms of benefit for the region, for the state, for the West Coast, you know, we live and die with I-5 across the Columbia and across the Willamette.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not people wandering around back and forth to jobs. A lot of that is heavy trucks. And all those trucks that are coming across I-5 coming across the CRC and coming across the Glen Jackson, every single one of them that's headed south is coming across the Boone Bridge. And you look at the number of lanes, when you add up the lanes on the Glen Jackson and the CRC and compare that to the number of lanes going across the Boone Bridge, there's no capacity down here to move that traffic through from Seattle to Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's been a big issue in the South Metro corridor, is what happens to I-5, because there's not a second bridge across the Willamette.
Your point is well made, Councillor, and it's something that we struggled with early in the process. And the decision was made by the Metro Council that the corridors that we would fund as Tier 1 corridors, we would not address the limited access expressway system, recognizing that the interstate highway system and the expressway system is and should be the responsibility of the state and the federal government, and that it shouldn't be our local, if you will, regional money that should be funding those major projects on that interstate system. And we need, in addition to the stuff we're doing, we need to continue to hold the state and the feds' feet to the fire for them to address those major issues on those major corridors. You'll notice that the Columbia River crossing is not included here either. Also, keep in mind that we didn't identify on this list projects that either through the federal, state, or even regional money already has money identified for that project, for the construction. We specifically wanted wanted to identify and provide funding for needed improvements that at present there is no discernible funding source for.
Well, what is the project on the Glen Jackson?
Well, that was part of an identified as a Tier 2 corridor, and it was primarily, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Knapp, you can jump in here. Mayor, I talked about the task force that looked at these corridors, and Mayor Knapp sat on that task force, so he could probably tell you better than I could how it was narrowed down and got to this point. But I think my remembrance is the discussion of the Glen Jackson and portions of 205 going south was like for the potential of identifying a project for bus on shoulder doing a transit improvement. Is that correct, Mayor?
I believe that's correct, and our local transit director, Mr. Bashir, and our local system has been working with ODOT to run some tests about bus on shoulder on the 205 that would connect our community here around the loop to the Oregon City side. They're looking at similar operations that are being conducted in other parts of the country. It seems like a kind of a new idea to many of us, and yet we're not breaking new ground that hasn't been done some other places with that. The other thing is that we've collaborated with Clackamas County on what has been long-term Clackamas County priority for the 212, and we recognize that needs to get done probably with some boost from local, and that until we get the 205 major project done, which is not funded by this, but that the Boone Bridge project will probably come on the heels of the 205 work from Stafford Road around across the Abernathy into Oregon City, however that funding is achieved. So it's sort of a multi-step process, I guess.
Well, I've been involved in this and at every level for many years, and I don't have any objections to any of these projects, but there's not much benefit here for the city of Wilsonville's issue at the moment, which is the Boone Bridge not going, and then it spills out onto all of our surface roads. And I certainly have always pushed for more state and federal involvement in Interstate 5 especially, but also 205. And it would be nice to see a high level of regional commitment to pressing the feds and pressing ODOT to address the Boone Bridge because we can't handle all those trucks. I mean, we've got like 30%, 40% more trucks coming across the Boone Bridge than across the CRC.
I appreciate your comments, and as I said, your point is well taken. But I remember that this map does not necessarily, well, it doesn't at all do anything. It doesn't identify what priorities are in the region in general, but only what we've identified as priorities that would be funded with this measure.
Right. So I guess that would be my question for Metro or JPAC or whatever. What is the level of commitment and willingness to pressure federal money for this interstate corridor that is rightly a West Coast corridor? It should be California and Washington just as interested in it as Oregon.
You're absolutely right. It's an interstate highway. It's needed for interstate commerce.
Right.
So it's a federal issue and should be an issue of all the states. I would say that the Boone Bridge is a topic of conversation both at JPAC and also at the Region 1 Act that I sit on as well with ODOT with a conversation about where their funding should go.
I want to jump in here really quick, and
This is Councilor West, Mr. Dirksen.
Yes, sir. I see everybody's pictures, so
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Dirksen, and thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. And, you know, it's hard to see your part of the region not necessarily as represented as much of the other parts of the region, but one area that I see that is a big issue with the transportation is our ability to get through mass transit our citizens into the Portland area to get to work in a reasonable amount of time. And we have West, but it's very limited. I know the mayor spoke about Brashear on the buses on the side of the highway, but is there anything in this packet or anything that would help address getting Wilsonville citizens maybe to OHSU or the downtown area or different, you know, major employer hubs within region?
Well, of course, the Southwest Corridor light rail line being completed to Bridgeport Village. You know that the SMART system has buses that go from Wilsonville to that transit center. And so then you would have a transfer at that point, and then you would have a light rail ride that would take you to OHSU, also PCC, all those other points along the Southwest Corridor, and then, of course, it would take you directly into the central city. One of the beauties of the improvement that's being done to the bus rapid transit that's currently going to be under construction soon. The funding has been sourced for it for Division Street, which would provide you with the ability with using a higher capacity transit without having to go through downtown Portland, but by going north on the light rail, the Southwest Corridor light rail, and then you could cross over and all the way out to Gresham without having to transfer through downtown Portland, and that's going to be a big plus. And the improvements that are being anticipated to Powell Boulevard with this funding measure would also help that as well. So I think at the very least there, transit-wise, the capacity and the speed and the reliability that the Southwest Corridor light rail line is going to provide will do much to serve all of my district, including my community where I live in Tigard, in Tualatin, and Sherwood and Wilsonville.
And that's in the $975 million. That's the you're talking about the Southwest Corridor right here in our packet, right? In the PowerPoint.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
That $975 million would be the local funds we would need to match the feds to build the light rail line and do the other necessary improvements to the whole Barber corridor.
Okay, fantastic. And then my other question, you talked about the displacement funds for people potentially displaced, and are those funds specifically for those that due to constructions and changes and that they may be displaced because of the improvements, or can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, it's similar to other funding that we have elsewhere that we've identified. It's essentially to help reduce or prevent what's oftentimes called gentrification, where when an area is improved and the transportation system is improved, it then becomes more expensive. And the more economically challenged people who live there that maybe need the transit more than anyone else then can't afford to live there anymore. And so this would be money that would go towards supporting affordable housing and other things so that folks living in that area or that need to live in that area but are of lower economic capacity would still be able to live there.
And then I have one more question. The employer payroll tax on how we can pay for it page and just maybe clarify, this would be on, I think our employers for our SMART system participate locally in Wilsonville with something similar. This would be on top of that, but more of a regionally wide that employers would participate in this. Or businesses, it's like a business tax from the employer payroll tax. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that.
Anybody else? Questions? Thank you, Mr. Dirksen. It is a complex subject, and if the Metro Council concludes that it's ready for the voters in November, then there certainly will be an awful lot of discussion before the day of the vote, I'm sure.
You know, it seems like a long ways off, but when you're trying to put a measure together, it's like day after tomorrow.
Yeah, it'll be upon us. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. This was an interesting way to do it. As you know, Mr. Mayor, I'm much more of I like to be face to face. So while it's functional, it's not ideal for me.
Yeah, I understand. It's not ideal probably for any of us, but it seems to be necessary in today's situation.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
That will bring us then to citizens' input and community announcements, which is an opportunity for visitors to address City Council on items not on the agenda. Also time to address things that are on the agenda but not scheduled for a public hearing. Staff and council will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizens' input, either before tonight meeting ends or as soon as we can thereafter. We do ask people to limit your comments to about 3 minutes. Is there any member of the audience present who would like to speak in public input?
Mayor, I can tell you that we have no public in the audience, so we either have a boring agenda or people are taking the social distancing to heart, or some combination of the two.
Maybe a little bit of both. Okay. All right. If we have nobody ready to step forward, then I'll ask council if you have pertinent comments or liaison reports you would like to make for the benefit of council and the public. Council President Agrawal.
Sure. As you mentioned earlier, a lot of the meetings are being rescheduled or canceled or in different forms. But this last week on the 11th, we did join the Budget Committee for a meeting. Along Councilor Linville was part of that meeting as well. And that is a very great group of community members that are dedicated to the work of looking at the budget for the city. It was our kind of mid-year review meeting. And one of the topics that we discussed, too, as we checked in with everyone was potential of holding meetings in a different sort of format online or whatnot. So that did come up with that group as well. And also, I logged on to the LOC call this last Friday. They did a call about the coronavirus and information for local governments. I know city staff, Brian Cosgrove, our city manager, was on that call as well. And it sounds like that's perhaps going to be a reoccurring call that they may do, or they do have a great website that our city manager sent out a link to for all of us that has kind of many links to different takes on the issue from all of our different state level partners. So that was good. I wanted to make some comments, I guess, to the rest of council and to the community as well. Thank you all for being so adaptable. Thank you so much to staff for all of your work in setting up this meeting and the many other probably thousands of decisions that you've been making and things you've been working on the last few weeks now. And I just feel very appreciative to be part of that and to be along with all of you. One thing I wanted to share with you this last weekend, just kind of on a personal level, but it was meaningful to me, so I wanted to share. I noticed, in a social media feed, I noticed many pictures of friends their kids celebrating birthdays this last weekend, and I don't know why it was like the birthday weekend for everyone, but there was many pictures of kids celebrating their birthdays, and it struck me to see these pictures of kids standing behind a cake that was clearly meant for a large group of friends and family, and they were there by themselves and maybe their parents or siblings, but we're all going to have some disappointments and changes and have to adapt. But when I saw these pictures, these kids had a huge smile on their face still, and they were being so generous and graceful in adapting to the changes that's happening. And I just thought we can learn a lot from their selflessness, and that we carry on and we still do good work. We still do good products, and I think our meeting here is another take on that we carry on in a different way, but we can still have good outputs and still be kind to one another too. So thank you all for joining me in those efforts. Yeah. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor. I appreciate those comments. Councilor Lehan.
Yes, well, I know I would echo a lot of what Councilor Ackroval said. My calendar has become a whole big bunch of X's through everything. That's off, that's off, that's off. I'm just canceling things left and right. But I would also like to compliment the staff for their adjustments, because it's like every day is a whole new schedule and a whole new set of protocols, new rules that are different than yesterday's rules. And so the staff has been every day having to come in with the ability to adapt and change, and also the level of coordination with our business community, with the school district, everybody, and looking out for our citizens. Especially, I have concerns about closing the senior center because so many of them depend on those lunches and other activities that the senior center hosts, and us escalating the Meals on Wheels program to try to ameliorate that. I think we've just really, the staff at all levels of our departments has really gone out of the way. And then I would like to say this is, after tonight now, the plan to close all, or to not have eating in restaurants or bars is a huge blow to, how many restaurants and bars do we have in Wilsonville? This is huge. We have so many lunch places, so many dinner places. And I would just say, so this is since you still can get takeout, this next couple of weeks, good idea to have some more takeout. Go get some takeout at restaurants you wouldn't ordinarily go get takeout at, or call up, figure out how to get some takeout food, because they have no one coming in. They will have no one coming into their restaurants, and that's a lot of impact to a lot of people. And finally, since we won't be going out tomorrow to a bar to celebrate or anything, I have to say, tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day, and there aren't going to be any parades, and no one's going to be drinking the green beer down at the tavern. So I just want to wave my Irish flag and remind people that it is a day to recognize our Irish heritage in the U.S. and around the world. So happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you, Councilor Lehan. Appreciate those comments also. Councilor West.
Thank you. I want to, it's, I know we're all talking about COVID-19 and how it's impacting the community, and, it's funny when we as a community often face hardships or crisis, we want to be around the people we care about, right? We want to be, we as humans, we come together. Community really matters. And here we are being isolated from one another. And that can make things really difficult. And
yeah, your microphone is kind of
you hear me okay?
got some trouble. So I don't know if there's anything different you can do than you were, because you haven't had any problem up till now on the mic.
How am I now, guys? Can you hear me? No.
We can hear, but it's just kind of gotten a feedback loop or something.
It's just a little garbled.
Is it better now?
No. But
No,
Not much, but you can go. You can go ahead.
Can I keep going? I'm sorry. I'll do my best. I don't know why it's doing that. I guess my point is FaceTime works. Call 5 people in the community and check in on them. If they're at a high-risk population, check in on them. If you know somebody that has difficulty getting groceries and you're a younger person, go and there's not so many people at the grocery store if that's possible, or find a way to get them some supplies and help them. Find ways to use technology and other means to take care of one another. Be very mindful. I know for us parents, this is a difficult time because this isn't summer break. This isn't really spring break either. And we've faced the possibility of our kids having their education really severely cut short within the school year here. So that's concerning too. And there's a lot of stressors out there for all of us, but find creative ways. We have Uber Eats in Wilsonville. We have Grubhub. We have these services where people will deliver the food at a very reasonable rate, delivery free within the community, and they'll bring it to your home, and find ways to support those local businesses. I think that's a great thing to say. And we'll get through this. This is, this is a temporary pinch, I believe, that we'll have to endure. And I guess just find ways to still care for other people in the community. Check on somebody. Maybe by tomorrow afternoon, call those 5 people and just check in on them, and then be available to help them.
Thank you very much. Good words. Councilor Linville.
Well, I don't have very much to report. I did appreciate, that was my first budget meeting this last week. And I agree with Councilor Ackerval that there is a really fine group of citizens that participate in that budget process. Once again, it just reminded me that we are very, very fortunate in this city to have the level and the expertise of the citizens that are willing to serve on boards and commissions and advisory committees. Very, very fortunate. I think it's unfortunate that we are going to have to cancel our volunteer appreciation dinner. That is always a wonderful event and a very small way that the city can show its appreciation for what our citizens do for us. I hope that it will be postponed and we will have the opportunity at a later date to give them that recognition. I did want to really forward my appreciation to, I sent our city manager an email and asked him to forward from me specifically to our city staff how much I appreciate how quickly and how efficiently they have responded to this really disruption in all of our business. And they have done, and I think under our city manager's direction, done really a fine job of getting our emergency response groups up and running and making the kinds of cancellations that I think are important. While I also appreciate that citizens are not being able to do some of the things that they have done in the past. I truly believe from a public health perspective that the social distancing and the actions that we take today will actually make a big difference, both in terms of the health of our community, as well as the length of time that we will have to endure these changes to our lifestyle. So I think it's a wonderful time to settle in and connect more with family and find some wonderful books to read. And so I know that we'll all be doing many of those things, taking walks, and we're fortunate to be having some really nice weather. So outside of a little snow here and there, we're fortunate to be able, I think, to. In the big scheme of things, I think for Wilsonville, we don't have a lot of our citizens that are ill. We're doing a good job in containing and accommodating social distancing, and so I appreciate our staff, the city staff, and all they're doing. And my colleagues for being flexible. This is great for us to meet by technology, and thank you to the staff for allowing us to do that. Oh, I just did want to mention too, and then I'll ask maybe the city manager could talk a little bit about the free trees that are available for pickup and where citizens might be able to get those trees. I think we're allowing coupons for free trees to be native trees to be planted in riparian areas and areas where there is soil erosion, and so that's a really wonderful benefit and a great thing to do during these times when we don't have anything else to do. Pick up 5 trees and go plant them where they belong. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll let the city manager report on that when he gets to his point a little later on, but we should proceed on right this minute and try to get a little bit of our formal business done. If I could ask for the consent agenda to be read, please.
Resolution number 2799, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract with McClure & Sons, Inc. for the Memorial Park Lift Station project.
We don't comment on consent agendas particularly unless there's discussion needed, in which case they should be removed from consent. What is council's preference with regard to the consent agenda that has been read?
Your Honor, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there seconded by Councilor West? Thank you very much. Motion and a second to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Bringing us to new business. If we could ask for Resolution 2782.
Resolution number 2782, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville supporting a 2040 plan and development grant application to Metro for Frog Pond East and South master planning and related work.
Thank you. Are we having a staff presentation on this?
Yes, we are. Just one moment while they load up the presentation.
Thank you.
Right, good evening. Dan Pauly, Planning Manager. And so we're here to talk about an upcoming funding and a grant from Metro to fund an upcoming project for the planning of the east and south neighborhoods of Frog Pond. So as you may recall, the Frog Pond area plan, which included 3 neighborhoods, was was approved back in 2015. One of those neighborhoods, the West neighborhood, was already in the urban growth boundary, so we completed a master plan for that back in 2017. Then in 2018, Metro approved urban growth boundary expansion that included the east and south neighborhoods. And now is the time to get the funding to complete the master planning for those two neighborhoods. So beyond the master planning, we'll also be looking through this project to continue the efforts and the strategic actions that will be identified in the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, as well as follow up on the upcoming work for compliance with House Bill 2001 in integrating those standards and what we learned from that project into this as well. So and I will mention as I talk about this process, just a few minutes before this meeting, I did get an email from Metro staff saying they're not sure if any of this is changing at this point. But as it sits, the application is due at the beginning of April, which would include this resolution in support of the grant from council. Then Metro plans on selecting finalists in May, and then Metro and city staff would work during May through July on finalizing the scope, et cetera. And then Metro Council taking action on the grants in July. And following, we'd work through an intergovernmental agreement and be able to begin work by this fall. So that said, what the project timeline is though funds would be available in fall, we aren't planning on kicking this off until early 2021, where we'll do a bunch of background work and working with the consultants, and followed by a public kickoff in the summer of that year. And we'll continue then the work through the rest of 2021 and through 2022 with adoption by City Council in the fall of 2022, which meets the Metro requirement. When they approved their urban growth boundary expansion, they required that this work be done within 4 years of that approval, which would be December 2022. So a bit on the finances. I will note this number is $1,000 off from the number in the resolution, but it's subject to refinement as we go and finalize the scope. But this project, when we look at the amount that it'll cost, it has many of the same components as Frog Pond West, but it goes beyond those requirements because there's a number of conditions of approval that were put upon the project by the urban growth boundary expansion approval. And this, as well as there's some specific requirements in the area plan that directed further study as part of this project. So from the area plan, there's direction to further study the middle housing component that is shown in the area plan for a portion of the east neighborhood, as well as study the neighborhood commercial hub that's shown in the east neighborhood. For the conditions of approval, some specific things there is work on affordable housing, particularly around encouraging accessory dwelling units, requirement to look at SDC methodologies, as well as there's requirements for extensive public involvement, as would be expected, particularly targeted to historically marginalized groups. So all of that work is included in this funding that we're anticipating. So briefly then, what the project will entail is the background research and setup that I mentioned. Will then, a large portion will be this land use and community design. This looks at the number of units in smaller geographies called sub-districts, similar to what we did for Frog Pond West. And then also looking at the community design elements, the streetscapes, to make sure it's all coherent with, it presents kind of a district feeling for all of Frog Pond. And then finally, we will do the implementation and adoption projects. and get this all adopted by 2022. So it'll be an interesting project. Look forward to working with the Planning Commission and Council on this, and would ask for the council's support of us pursuing the funding for this project through Metro. And happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Polly, for that presentation. It sounds like a pretty ambitious scope of work and a pretty constrained or finite timeline in which to accomplish that. Of course, we have experience with the planning work for Prague Pond West quite recently, and I assume that we're drawing on that experience in projecting what this is going to take. But I think you'll be busy.
Yes.
Council, do you have questions or clarifications you'd like to have from staff with regard to this proposal? Councilor Linville.
I just think we're very fortunate to be able to have a grant to help us do the planning. So I think it's great that we're able to apply for this, and hopefully we'll get it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Other questions, comments? Councilor West.
Thank you, Your Honor. Question under the budget impacts. It says that we had like 5.3 million. Am I correct? That was set aside, but that they came back at 3.8 million. And the difference, does that stay in the pot for future needs, or how is that handled? Because I saw that one of the bids was 4.3, so they both came under, I guess, what we had budgeted, which is nice. And I was wondering if you could tell me like what happens with the difference there, or if that's going to go for the future project, or am I reading this? Hold on. Yeah, under the current impacts.
Councilor West, are you
I think maybe that was Metro's entire budget to award. I'm not sure.
Right.
Are you talking about the consent item, or are you talking about the grant that we just talked about?
Dan should have.
I'm talking about in the presentation in the.
Looking at the staff report.
Am I on the wrong page here?
No.
Am I in the?
You're good.
I'm good. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so just like when I was reading it, when I made my note, I was just kind of curious about, is that 5.3, it said it was like in our budget included 5.3 million for engineering, construction, contract administration, and overhead for the entirety of the project, but we came in significantly under that. So I'm just curious what happens with the difference, or if that will be used for additional costs regarding this issue, or what happens with that?
Are you talking about the pump station?
Am I on the same page you guys are?
Yeah, I think that's a different item.
The Memorial Park pump station and not the Metro grant, if I'm not mistaken.
Am I on the wrong? I'm in the binder.
Or the water treatment plant.
Yeah, I think you're on the wrong agenda item, Councilor. We're on the Metro grant right now. That should be under new business. Yeah, it's the only item under new business. And I don't know what page that corresponds with your council packet, but if you have a hard copy of your packet, it should be page 72 of 173.
Thank you. I had it up on the. Okay, here. Okay. Yes, I was looking at the wrong thing. Yes, my apologies.
No worries. It's all good.
I have it up on the iPad. I have it here in paper. It's not.
That's why you guys had hard copies, because we knew something like this was probably going to happen.
Yeah.
Thank you. When we get to there, I'll have the same question probably.
Other questions? Councilor Lehan? No? Okay.
No, I think it sounds good.
All right. if that is all the case, this is not a hearing. This is just for council's decision on proceeding with this grant application for the planning of Frog Pond East and South. Council, what's your pleasure with regard to 2782?
Your Honor, I move to approve resolution number 2782.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Move to approve 2782. Discussion. No discussion. If everybody's comfortable and ready to go, I'll ask for the vote on the motion to approve resolution 2782. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. We have no continuing business scheduled for tonight, but we have a couple of public hearings upcoming. I'll ask for 2801 first of all.
Resolution number 2801, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the use of construction manager, general contractor, CMGC, alternative contracting method for the water treatment plant expansion project.
And this is on paper packet page 83 of 173.
Thank you.
Do we have a staff presentation on this? And I'm going to need to formally open a public hearing format here, which I will do now. I will call to order Wilsonville City Council public hearing on resolution 2801 as has been read. Ladies and gentlemen, City Council will take public testimony tonight in a public hearing format, which will be conducted as follows. First, city staff will present their report, then we will ask for testimony by proponents, opponents, and those neither in favor nor opposed. If you wish to testify, please complete a speaker card from the counter at the side of the room, pass forward to the city recorder. When called, come forward to the microphone, state your name and address, and make your statement. I do ask of the multitudes there in the chamber that you not repeat testimony already given, simply indicating your agreement with certain prior testimony is entirely sufficient. So if we could have the staff present their report now, please.
So, Mayor, we don't have a report. This was presented to you earlier in council. Mike, I guess I could have Mike just, in brief, just state what the CMCG process is, just in very brief form, instead of a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, we could do that.
Go ahead, Mike.
Right, so the CMGC contracting method is...
Could we ask you to be closer to the microphone, please?
Is this any better? Okay, I'll try to just speak up. But the CMGC method is an alternate to the traditional design, bid, build approach, where we wouldn't be obligated to just take the low bid. We can consider contractor qualifications, and more than that, we can bring them in during the design process to help figure out how to go about doing construction to minimize the risk of disrupting treatment plant operations. So it's an exemption from the traditional competitive bidding process, but because of the risks involved in keeping a treatment plant operational during major construction, we feel that it's a warranted and beneficial approach to take.
And, sir, if I understood you correctly from the work session, there is a point at which the council can make a determination to go a different direction if it turns out that we're not getting where we need to go under this method. Is that accurate?
That's correct. During design, as we approach final design, we negotiate a guaranteed maximum price with the contractor, and if we can't come to terms on that, we can simply complete the design package and put it out to bid in a traditional procurement process.
Oh, hold on.
Okay, Okay, Council, any questions for staff on this item?
And for me.
I'm not seeing any questions from Council for staff at this point. Is there any public input to be had tonight?
We still have no members of the public in the audience.
No members of the public in the audience. For those of you there, you can tell us that we're ready to close the public hearing if that is the case.
Check.
All right, I will close public hearing on Resolution 2801 and ask Council, what would you like to do with this resolution?
Your Honor, I move to approve resolution number 2801.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilor West, seconded by Councilor Lehan, that we approve 2801. Any discussion? Not seeing any. I will ask for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. It passes 5-0. Thank you all much. Bringing us to Resolution 2802, which is on our packet, page 95 of 173.
Resolution number 2802, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville approving building permit fee schedule, mechanical permit fee schedule, and plumbing permit fee schedule, and repealing resolution number 2780.
Thank you. This also is a formal legislative public hearing, so I will now open the formal public hearing. Call to order City of Wilsonville City Council public hearing on Resolution 2802 as has been read. Ladies and gentlemen, Council will take public testimony tonight in a public hearing format, which will be conducted as follows. First, City staff will present their report. Then we will ask for testimony by proponents, opponents, and those neither in favor nor against the proposed resolution. If you wish to testify, please complete a speaker card from the counter at the side of the room, pass forward to the city recorder. When called, come forward to the microphone, state your name and address, and make your statement. I do request those providing testimony not repeat testimony already given, simply indicating your agreement with certain prior testimony is entirely sufficient. Do we have Mr. Carlson perhaps there?
Yes.
All right. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
Member of City Council. My name is Dan Carlson. I serve as the city's building official. Tonight's presentation is really geared, since this is a public hearing, more toward the public. You guys have covered this topic to great extent in your work sessions. And so I'm just going to give you a quick overview. We're going to talk about the items that you see highlighted on your screen, what we do in the building division, what permit activity is doing, how fees are calculated, and how do we change them, the elements of a fee proposal, the gap we need to cover, what our comparators do for their fees, and the timeline. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So what do we do in the building division? The building division issues construction permits, conducts plan reviews, performs building safety and other inspections. And we do this by administering and implementing the state specialty codes that you see there on the right-hand side of your screen for structural, mechanical, plumbing, life safety, ADA accessibility, energy efficiency, and a whole host of other codes as well. We provide project development guidance, such as you see here on your screen. This is some guidance that we were fortunate to provide to the Home Builders Association, a presentation you can actually see at a Home Builders meeting, where we shared what we can do, what we can possibly do to help facilitate the 2019 Northwest Street of Dreams, which included a brand new process that we implemented for doing electronic plan review. It's actually the first time that we've done electronic plan review in Wilsonville, and we were able to do this for all Street of Dreams homes. We also do building safety outreach with kids during Building Safety Month and the block party. We're very excited about that outreach. In the middle there, you can also see that the mayor has signed a proclamation in 2019. Hopefully we'll have another one here in 2020 in the next couple of months. One of the areas that we're really proud of is we were recently audited by the Insurance Services Office, ISO. The Insurance Services Office has a building code effectiveness grading schedule. They audit nationwide. They audit around 14,000 building departments. And recently we completed our audit. And in their grading schedule, they actually grade building departments on a scale of 1 to 10. You can see that scale right here toward the bottom of your screen. This is kind of hard to see, but these are all the different areas that they rate. They come in and they audit in the building department. So the top score is a 1, and the bottom score is a 10, and we actually scored a 2 in both commercial disciplines and in residential disciplines. So we're really proud of that. It's something that is hard to achieve, and you can see if I go into the next screen, it's a little hard to see, I apologize, but the average score for Oregon is a class of a 3. So this is actually Oregon's class. And if you want to look at this some more, you can go into ISO's Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule website and check that out. But that tells us really that we're doing a good job, that we're providing excellent service, that, we hear that feedback all the time from customers. So our funding source really is building permit fees and charges for services like plan review. Our revenues are received at 2 points in time. The first is at the time of permit application, and the second is at time of permit issuance. So revenue really has to be healthy enough to cover a downturn and to bridge long enough to provide services for the full duration of a project. So what is the level of permit activity? This chart shows where we're at. It's a 12-year look. It starts in 2007 and concludes in 2019. You can see that we had record levels of activity from 2014 through early 2018. It really dropped off at the end of 2018 and really, in my opinion, seems to have leveled off to what I would call a normal level of development activity. The new commercial is flat. The residential had a high of 381 in 2015, and it's flat now at 134. It still, though, is a robust level of service. We have commercial TIs, remodels, and additions that you can see there with the red line, and that is about half of what it was in 2017, now at 158. We're also winding down in Villebois, which has been noticeable. The start of Frog Pond has been very welcome, but it's not the same robust nature as Villebois. We're being told by developers that we should anticipate between 10 and 12 new home permits a month. So moving on here, how are fees calculated, or actually our revenue gap? Our revenue gap is showing here, it follows a similar trend level of activity from the building construction activity that you see, same sort of levels. You can see a high in 2015-16, and then really leveling off in 18-19, and our budget not being far off of 18-19, and we're projecting a revised 19-20 of also not being far off. So seems like it's leveled off somewhat. But it is a forecast that includes revenues that are not meeting our expenditures. So how do we compare? Well, this is a comparison, it's in your packet, of our building permit fee, or our building permit fees from other jurisdictions. 8 of them are our comparators. You can see that we have 8, our left column, rather, defines apples to apples for size and value of projects. So we have single-family dwellings valued at $260,000, single-family additions, $50,000, multifamily, commercial, $868,000, new commercial office, and then a commercial alteration. In the right column, let me go back here. In the right column, you see that we have a red column that says our high comparators, and then a blue column is our low comparators. Where we're proposed is the purple column, and then what is our average. So with our building permit fee adjustment and plan review fees of 8.5% for building permit fees and plan review fees being equal to 30%, we're looking at coming in at an average, or what is close to our average for comparators. So on a single family home, we're looking at a fee package that would be $3,651. Compared, the average of our comparators is $3,693, so pretty close. And if you kind of go down through here, you can see an addition is $1,051 versus $1,068. New multifamily is $13,826 versus $13,127. New commercial for an office would be $45,844 versus $43,158. And then an addition is $1,795 versus $1,700. So really trying to keep close with our averages, certainly not in the high end, but taking ourselves out of the low end in a couple of categories. So moving on here. So elements of a fee proposal, we have these basic philosophical approaches where we want to keep basic fees affordable. We don't want to discourage people from getting building permit fees by having the basic fee so high that they choose to do work without a permit. We'd rather have them come in, get a permit, work with people, and just really try hard to recover costs in other ways. So we also do want to recover costs. We don't want to nickel and dime people. We want to simplify our fees where we can. We want to keep that revenue local. We want to do a one-time catch-up adjustment. That's the 30% fee increase this year, and then implement smaller annual adjustments based on a COLA or a cost of living increase. And then we want to also provide stakeholders with plenty of notice, plenty of time to adjust their bids. So looking at an implementation and effective date of July 1st, 2020. So how are fees calculated? Well, we're required by Oregon administrative rule to calculate fees based upon a consistent fee methodology. The fee methodology is basically a valuation-based methodology. We use either valuation, and that includes the contractor's bid, or evaluation based on a national ICC table. And the state law requires that we use the higher of the two of those. We also have fees that are based on a per item basis. For example, the number of fixtures, number of mechanical pieces of equipment, that sort of thing. What this means is that we have the same fee methodology that's used throughout the state, but we're not necessarily going to have the same fee amounts. So that's a really important distinction. Each jurisdiction gets to set their fee tables and their fee amounts according to what it takes for them to do business in their local jurisdiction. As for the fee tables, these are all posted on our website and in your packets. Just to briefly cover these, we have a valuation section where we define very clearly what it is that goes into a project's valuation. We also have a residential schedule, a commercial schedule, and then other fee schedule. Moving on, we have a mechanical fees. Same sort of thing. We have residential fee types, commercial fee types. One of the things about commercial mechanical fees is that they're required to be based not on the pieces of equipment, but on the value of that whole project. That's by state law. And then plumbing, we have a residential fee schedule, site utilities, we have fixtures for each fee, and then medical gas, residential fire suppression, and then other plumbing fees. So that makes up our fee schedules. With that, we're looking at timelines. So in January, we sought your initial council feedback through a lengthy work session. That was great feedback that we got out of that work session. We also gave notice to the State Building Codes Division. The state law requires a 45-day minimum notice. That allowed us to proceed. In February, we did local stakeholder outreach, which included an open house. It included an email notice to over 90 of our, or around 90 of our local stakeholders. And BCD also, the state conducted their outreach statewide as well. Tonight, we have our council adoption and public hearing, and then the proposal is for fees to be effective on July 1st. I would also note that I did hear that you should have received a notice from the Home Builders Association that came through during your work session. You should have received that through your email. It talks about the fee increase and offers their perspective on that fee increase, as well as some other fee-related issues. So I encourage you to take a look at that and to consider that in the course of your public hearing. That is all I have for you. I'd be happy to take any questions. I would definitely recommend approval of Resolution 2802, making fees effective July 1st, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Council, any questions to clarify any of the presentation? I'm not seeing any. We have had several good discussions. I have not had a chance to review the home builder's testimony. Does anyone have an ability to recap that for us or not?
I just pulled it up, but I haven't read it. I haven't had a chance to read it either.
I haven't either.
We can recap it for you if you'd like.
Yeah, I can give you the Cliff Notes version of it. It basically says that
that'd be good. Yeah.
They don't have any necessarily disagreement with the fee increase. They acknowledge that the fee increase is necessary to provide the good services that we provide. They appreciate the service levels that we provide. That was noted. They do weave into it a request to consider other elements that go into the costs of development, such as systems development fees. Those really are those are discussions for perhaps another time, and while they're related to development fees and permit fees, they're really not related to your resolution approval. So I'd ask you to consider that as well. That's the thumbnail version.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council, question, clarification, anything, or shall we go to public hearing? Councilor West, do you have a...
I noticed here that you guys look like you did a really good job kind of pegging us kind of right at the average. I see that. Our neighbor, though, is in so many categories. Tualatin is like by far the least in the region. I guess my question is, are there specific drivers for similar cities like ours that make it more uniquely different for them to have different costs than like we would? Like, why would Tualatin be, are they going to face the same issue that we're facing now, where they're going to have to increase fees? Or
yes, there are a number of...
Some of these are, even though you look at like there's a small grouping here, some of the outliers are pretty far. Like the high is a lot higher and the low is a lot lower, so that's his averages too.
So
I guess, I don't know.
Is your question about Tualatin?
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of growth going on right now, so that might be driving a lot of it. And I can't speak to what their policy standpoint is. We'd have to reach out to their management team and their council to figure out why they're not trying to go for full cost recovery. So I can't speak to that. But what I can say is that the level of growth between the two cities is not really comparable. Beyond that, I can't really speak to why they set their fees the way they do.
I would like to say,
Councilor Lehan.
yes, before I find the right button. in my experience, there's always a range of fees from city to city, largely dependent on when they last raised their fees. So the people who just recently raised their fees look like they have really high fees. And the ones who are behind the eight ball or they just haven't got around to it yet and they haven't raised them in 5 or 10 years, they look like they're really low. But the whole thing can change next year when the city at the bottom is all of a sudden the city at the top. I mean, they just keep changing places is my experience with how that works. It's more a factor of when they last reevaluated their fees, in my experience. But
I would agree with that.
Or at least that's a factor.
I would also add in the level of service that's being offered. I don't know about their building department, their building division in terms of their levels of service. I can tell you that ours is very high. And to offer a fee range that's in the kind of the middle and to still continue to provide that high level of service is probably why the home builders acknowledge that. That'd be my guess.
Any other questions? Councilor Linville, are you wanting to ask?
Well, I just really wanted to make the same comment that our city manager made. I think that, as I recall during our work session, we were needing to raise the fees in order to provide the level of service that we and the builders are expecting in terms of not having delays in their work. And so I think it is an issue of level of service, and I think we can address other issues in terms of building fees and those kinds of things at a later date.
And we hadn't raised them in a long time.
Yeah.
What's the deal?
Yeah, and Tuolin could easily be in the same situation that hasn't raised it in a long time. I don't know.
Yeah. They were waiting for us.
They were waiting for us, right?
On the other end, we're way cheaper than West Lynn, who's also our neighbor.
That's true. That's
so
true.
You get both neighbors are like, yeah.
All right. If that's all the discussion with staff for right now, we would be able to receive testimony from the public. Is there any member of the public there to testify?
We have no member of the public in the audience.
If there is no member of the public to testify, I am prepared to close the public hearing. Going once, going twice. I will close the public hearing and ask council, what is your pleasure with regard to resolution 2802?
Your Honor, I move to approve resolution number 2802.
Thank you. Is there a second from Councilor Linville? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Motion by Councilor Lehan, second by Councilor Linville. Any further discussion?
I would just say, if I may.
Councilor Ackerval.
Thank you. In our packet, I'll get the page number. So page 97 for hard copy or electronic, page 97. I thought one sentence sums it up. The potential impacts. Community benefits from having a building department that is adequately funded to provide the expertise and level of service needed to ensure safe, accessible, energy-efficient structures. And this is a good thing for people that are building or developing or doing additions or changes or modifications. It's a good thing for the neighbors. It's a good thing for the people that will be living in Wilsonville in the future. So nobody likes to raise fees ever. It's not a popular thing ever. But there's a real benefit to multiple parties here and to our community as a whole. So I think it's important that we stay on top of this.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I would just love the day that I agree, I totally agree with everything 100% Ackerval said. I just love the day that we can one day say for our community and citizens. I feel like we keep making votes, so we're incrementally increasing something, but maybe there'll be a meeting and a resolution that we can all be excited about where we can lower some fees or costs. But I know this is not one of those days, but maybe.
We can say that we did keep them low for 14 years.
Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, I'm going to ask for the vote on motion to approve resolution 2802. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That is our last booked item of business, but I know that City Manager Cosgrove has a report for us on a set of directions or instructions that came out of the governor's office today. So I would like to invite Mayor Cosgrove to present us with that information.
This is, if you haven't seen, it's called Governor Brown's Social Distancing Orders, which will be effective March 17th and will stay in effect for at least 4 weeks, if not longer. So I will just go through these real quickly, and it's more for the benefit of the community. I'm sure council is aware of these already. So effective tomorrow, statewide cancellation of all events and gatherings larger than 25 people. Exemptions to this order include workplaces, grocery stores, pharmacies, and retail stores. Restaurants, bars, and other establishments that offer food or beverages for sale are restricted to carry out and delivery only with no on-site consumption permitted. Food service at healthcare facilities, workplaces, and other essential facilities will continue. All other businesses are urged to assess their practices, implement strong social distancing measures, and close their doors temporarily if they cannot put the new guidance in place. The governor also announced the formation of 2 emergency operation command groups, one to manage the healthcare system's resources and the other to manage state resources generally. The state's Unified Command Emergency Response organizational structure and incident command management structure, similar to what Oregon would activate during a major Cascadia earthquake event, has also been activated to integrate public health response efforts with emergency management's response efforts in Oregon. And just as a reminder, new restrictions and guidelines may be announced at any time. We're dealing with these, it seems like, on almost an hourly basis ourselves. So just would ask people to be patient and understanding, and the only thing that's inevitable in life is change, and we will see a lot of change over the next few weeks.
Councilor West.
Brian, is there a link to those new guidelines on our website, easy access for citizens, or so they can, do we do? Okay.
We have an emergency management page that is linking all of these external resources and mandates. So yeah, we'll make sure that we get these up too. But trust me, everybody that runs a business in town is aware of these, and I'm sure that the folks that are out there generally know about them as well. But we'll do everything we can to pump out the information with our available resources.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, it's an unprecedented time for all of us. I worry greatly about a lot of our small businesses that are deeply embedded in the community and count on doing business every day and every week and every month. And I don't know what resources may be made available at state or federal levels, but it's going to be hard for a lot of those small businesses. And we need to be thinking about supporting them when we can. At the same time, we're trying to keep everybody as safe as possible.
I will tell you that as part of the emergency operations plan, small businesses are part of what we have to worry about. I've tasked Jordan Vance with conducting outreach and making sure that folks are aware of all the resources that are becoming available through the state and federal government. We will also work with the Chamber of Commerce to make sure we're getting out information to not just chamber members, but to the business community at large.
That's good. That's good. good.
I do have one additional item. I believe Councilor Linville, who's looking very comfortable in her chair right now, asked about, Councilor Linville, you asked about the neighborhood tree planting.
Yes.
Okay, so we just pulled up, this is being run by the Friends of Trees. We've contracted with them to run this program for our city because it's what they do. And as of right now, it's still a go for April 18th, but I did notice that all of tree plantings that they're conducting throughout the region for March have been canceled. I would not be shocked if ours gets canceled too. However, people can go to friendsoftrees.org and they can sign up to be part of that, or they can show up on April 18th at the community center at 8:45 a.m. where they will be kind of marshaled by the Friends of Trees folks, and there's a breakfast that will be provided as well. So that's on our website, and it's also on the Friends of Trees. We would direct people to the friendsoftrees.org to sign up, though.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cosgrove, we, in our packet, have a rolling schedule that has a number of different meetings still showing. Is that schedule updated at all, or?
No, it will be, though. And can I just tell you also that we're looking at every meeting. We're trying to, if we can avoid having a meeting with you all, we're going to try and do that. We're going to try and see if we can package things up so that we only have to meet once a month for a while if we can. So I would just ask you to, continue to be flexible and work with us as we try and figure out what's essential and what isn't. Right now this week, I've given departments 48 hours to work with Martin Montalvo to get through their continuity of operations planning. That's going to drive a lot of other things in terms of if we get ordered to reduce staff by 50%, as they did in the state of New York, all local governments are now on a mandate to have 50% of their workforce stay at home. If we end up in that situation too, we're trying to figure out what does that look like in terms of what is essential services for every department. So we have a lot of work that we're doing here. We're meeting daily. I've had several meetings today on this issue, so I'll continue to keep you in the loop on those things, but just change is going to happen, and it's going to be a lot. So I'll keep you up to date.
Yeah, I just don't want people to assume that any governmental meeting is going to happen just because it was on some calendar at some point. I think we need to be clear that we're trying to avoid that as much as possible.
And we are trying to figure out what the new norm is as well, Mayor. We're trying to figure out whether we have the bandwidth and capacity to do some of like what we're doing here tonight with other boards and commissions. It may be as rudimentary as conference calling in, but if this becomes something that we have to acclimate to for the next 6 months to a year, we can't just stop all business. We have to continue to work with our boards and commissions. So we're looking at each one independently to see what we can do to make this sort of thing happen if we need to.
All right. Well, I'm glad to be the guinea pigs.
I would say this turned out way better than I thought it was going to. So thank you all for being flexible. And
yeah, I think it went well.
I do too.
Stay healthy, everyone. Stay healthy.
Yeah.
All right. And we have legal business. Ms. Jacobson, anything?
I think Mr. Cosgrove has covered everything legal that I would talk about.
All right. Well, that being the case, I think I'm going to call us adjourned unless there's anybody that has another piece of business we need to pay attention to.
I just want to say that one thing there. Councilor Lehan is Irish too, so at some point I'm going to buy you that green beer, okay?
There you go.
I'm about as Irish as they come.
Okay, then you too.
And my poor daughter has her birthday tomorrow and can't even go out to dinner.
No.
Always been a party on her birthday.
Family takeout.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting adjourned at 8:57, and we'll look forward to continuing on the efforts that we're all working on. Appreciate it.